Now we can say that the season has started because all 16 teams that have qualified for the group stages of the CAF Champions League and the CAF Confederation Cup have been drawn into their groups. Let's break them down group by group coming up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mezahi. As always, this is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. If you've been following the last international break in African football, you would have seen that Cape Verde have qualified to the World Cup. I think even if you weren't following and if you aren't passionate about African football, you would have seen at least that headline. We have a piece up from Alistair Haworth. So we have a video vlog on this channel that you guys can go and check out if you want to put visuals to the qualification exploit. But if you want to learn more about the nation, learn more about the national team, I highly recommend you guys read the article in the description below. It's called An Island Nation Everywhere. And I learned so much from this article. Alistair was very insightful as usual. Just like, for example, explaining that how some of the players are related, explaining how the coach Bubista was sort of leading them as a player almost 25 years ago, and now he's leading them as a coach. So I guarantee you'll learn something. It's extremely insightful. So you can find a link to that article in the description below. But if not, if you just want to chat CAF Champions League and CAF Confederation Cup, then you've also come to the right place. Now, just a disclaimer, spoiler alert. I, to be completely honest, did not do a huge amount of prep work for these videos, right? And also, I would say that I've mostly been focused on European football and national team football over the last 45 days. I haven't really been watching too much of what's been happening around the continent. I did catch Sundowns versus Orlando Pirates last week. I've been watching Mokwena closely at MCF Algiers. So, of course, I have my finger on the pulse here and there. But I can't say that I've been watching all 16 of these teams in either competition extremely astutely as perhaps I did last year. That said, for me, like I said in the intro of this video, the season begins now. So I'm very excited. And these are just going to be sort of thoughts off the top of the dome as we go down club by club. So let's start with the CAF Champions League draw, because I think that's the more important competition. I think that's the one that mostly everybody cares about. In Group A, we have RS Berkane, Pyramids FC, Rivers United, Power Dynamos. Berkane and Pyramids, we have the CAF Confederation Cup winner and we have the CAF Champions League winner. These sides also met against one another in the CAF Super Cup just a few weeks ago, where Pyramids won 1-0, although the match did take place in Egypt, so they had a little bit of an advantage. So these are sides that have championship pedigree. These are sides that know one another very well, and these are sides that are both very ambitious, and I think are going to be gunning for the title. And they're drawn up in a group with, not very challenging Pot C and Pot D teams, because there are different kinds of Pot C and Pot D teams, right? There are, let's look at a club like Saint Aloue Lupopo or GS Kabylie. For me, those are the teams to avoid from Pot C and Pot D in particular. GS Kabylie, for example, they have the history. The club history is like they've won 2 Champions League titles before. They've won 3 CAF Confederation Cups before. Just because they haven't really been as successful over the last 15 years, really their last major CAF Champions League run came in 2010. That doesn't mean that it's not in the club's DNA, that the supporters and the board are extremely ambitious. They also have deep pockets. They've brought in Josef Zinnbauer, who obviously has won titles at Orlando Pirates before, that's very familiar with African football, and then some huge name signings like Ayman Mahious, who I think is the highest paid player in Algiers. He was, of course, the leading goal scorer of the group stages in the CAF Champions League last year when he was playing with CR Belouizdad. But not just him, they brought in a bunch of very good players, very experienced players, senior internationals from all around the continent. And so they have a great stadium. So this is a team like you do not want to draw them if you're in Group D. I'd rather have a team like, again, with all due respect here, but like Stade Malien. When you see what Joliba did last year, if we can compare Joliba and Stade Malien at a pretty decent level, we could say that Joliba were one of the weakest sides in the CAF Champions League last year. It'd be logical to expect them to be similar. Even if they would have improved a little bit, you wouldn't have improved to a point where they're going to be at the GS Kabylie level. We saw what St. Aloue Lupopo did against Orlando Pirates, knocking them out in the second round of qualifying. Lupopo sort of doesn't have the pedigree of GS Kabylie, but if you look at the players that they signed, they brought in, for example, Ajay Basiala, who was one of the mainstays of that Congolese Chan team. They also play in Lubumbashi, which is difficult to go and play. You could see that there's personality. You could see that they're a good side, you know. So not all Pot C and Pot D's are alike, and I think in Group A, Berkane Pyramids will sort of blow a sigh of relief and be like, you know what? There's two clear favorites here. This reminds me actually of the group last year that had Pyramids and Esperance de Tunis, which ran away with it. I think they were up against a side from Angola, Sagrada Esperança, and Joliba. I think it was going to be a very similar group. Rivers United are tougher, perhaps, in those two clubs. I remember when they came to USM of Algiers 2 years ago, they put up a really tough fight. But I still think there's a huge gulf in class here. And Pyramids, because they won the CAF Super Cup, because they've pretty much kept the exact same squad. They've only really lost their best player, Ibrahim Adel, who went to the UAE. But they've sort of replaced him. And other than that, other players have stepped up. Fiston Mayele has been unplayable since the CAF Champions League. So I do think they're going to be favorites here, but Berkane are right there. Berkane, I thought, had an incredible transfer window. They lost now their talisman in defense, Issoufou Dayo, a captain, a player that's been there for I think the better part of 8 years, and that's rare. You know, it's really cool, I think, to see on the African continent when a player goes to another country. Not necessarily for a huge club like, you know, Al Ahly, because Berkane, I mean, historically, is not the biggest club. They've become a big club over the last 10, 15 years. But historically, it's not Al Ahly, it's not, I don't know, you know, it's not even Wydad Casablanca, Raja Casablanca. So for Issoufou Daye to go there for 8 years to a small city, Berkane, it's not Casablanca, it's not Rabat, it's not, you know, Marrakesh. And for him to stay there and become the captain and to sort of lead them. That was a really cool story. So I was sad to see him go. But they've really done a great job they've kept their fullbacks. They, of course, have Munir, the backup goalkeeper from Morocco after Yassine Bounou in goal. They managed to hold on to Mamadou Lamine Camara, who was maybe their best player in the last 2-3 matches of the CAF Confederation Cup last year in the semifinals of the final. He's the defensive midfielder. He's the linchpin of that midfield. But they've added some quality as well. They've added a player named Zinedine Machache in midfield, who I remember when he was 19, 20 years old, he started playing matches in the French Ligue 1 for Toulouse. And people are thinking this guy is going to be a starter for the Moroccan national team or the Algerian national team because he's half Moroccan, half Algerian. And then he signs to Napoli. He plays in Marseille. He was a very promising prospect from the age of 22, 23, but he always seemed to have mentality issues, not maybe the most professional player. So he goes on a journeyman career. He never really makes it to these heights that we expected him to. But now he's back at Berkane, and I think he's leading them with, you know, 2 assists at the moment at the central attacking midfield position. So that's a player that I'm really excited to seeing. Yeah. But even like besides that, like Oussama Lemliwi, nominated for CAF Player of the Year. We saw what he did at the African Nations Championship. We saw what he did. Really, the calendar year of 2025 for him was one of the better I've seen ever for a local player in African football. He was absolutely on fire. And I really think that he has a shout for perhaps to start as a striker for the Moroccan national team at the AFCON. So Berkane look good. They've strengthened well, even if they've lost an iconic center half, but he was also an aging center half. Pyramids, like we said, there's no real change besides losing Ibrahim Adel. They brought in a Brazilian winger that was playing a UEFA Conference League last year. His name, I think, is Wellington Silva, something like that. So we'll see how he adapts to African football. Sometimes these moves, they hit or miss. And these two sides, I think, will comfortably progress. Group B for me is the group of death. El Ahly, Young Africans, AS FAR Rabat, GS Kabylie. This is, I think, by far the group of death. And I would even go as far as to say this is the strongest group that we've had in a CAF Champions League in a long time. Because I'm thinking about like the group of death last year was maybe like MC of Algiers, El Hilal, you know, that group. Who else was in that group? slipping my mind a little bit. I think Yanga was in that group as well. Um, that was a tough group, but this one it's on another level because Al Ahly, of course, perennial favorites. We can expect them to go probably in the final four, right? Even though they're not having a great start to the year. More on that in a second. Young Africans, similar in that this is sort of, I think, the last year where they're sort of in their peak. Because remember when they made the CAF Confederation Cup final with Mayele? I thought that was probably their best side in Aziz Ki and everything. I think they've sort of dipped a little bit. They've dropped, but particularly when you look at that midfield, it's not the midfield that it was, like 2-3 years ago with Aucho and Aziz Ki and the striker of Mayele. But still, they're pretty damn good, and they're still within that golden generation, that range. As far Rabat, I think are extremely unlucky that they've been overshadowed by RS Berkane, but I really rate them. When you see what their players did at the African Nations Championship, whether it's Mohamed Herimet, who was probably the best player at the African Nations Championship in East Africa, also their captain, also I think like leading the Butola in scoring at the moment, or maybe he's second in scoring with 5 goals. But not just him, the rest of the midfield, whether it's Anas Bash, whether it's what's his name, Hamza Aitor Khan, is it Hamza Aitor Khan? And Anas Bash also called up to the Moroccan national team because of his versatility. And then on top of all of that, they've brought in look, the way Youssef Fahli was playing towards the end of the year was really, really impressive as a number 9. Now he's back on the wing. I don't know. I really like how they look. And I think they're also second in the Butola at the moment, but they have a game in hand. If they win that, they'll go top. I really rate them. I think that they're going to be, if the coach, and I don't know much about the coach. Remember, I think he came from Petro Atletico, Alexander Santos. If he's who we think he could be, I think Asfar will get out of this group, actually. So I really, really rate them highly. And then GS Kabylie, again, they have Zimbauer. They have, I just spoke about them like a few minutes ago. They have Zimbauer. They have maybe one of the best stadiums in Africa. They have brand name players. Ayman Mahious is one of them, leading scorer of Chan in 2023, leading scorer of the group stages before they were knocked out with CR Belouizdad, highest paid player in Algeria. Zinedine Belaid, Algerian international, was playing in Belgium, came back to sign with GS Kabylie. Riyad Boudebouz, player with like 20, 30 Algerian caps, back to the Algerian league. And even like players that maybe the African public doesn't really know because they haven't really been playing in these competitions before and they're very young. A player like Lahlu Akharib, who was actually at the African Nations Championship with Algeria, and he played pretty well over there, who was instrumental against US Monastir in the qualifying rounds with a brace. He's somebody that's very versatile, can play as a number 8, can play on the wing, can play as a 10. And that I think is going to be a top player. So Ahli Young Africans, as far as GS Kabylie, this was, again, the toughest group to predict. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these teams get out of the group stage. I just think Al Ahly is the one lock because of their pedigree, because of the quality of the squad. Even if, again, they're not doing well. If you go look at the Egyptian Premier League at the moment, they just drew their last match, I think, to Al Masri. And I think they still have an interim manager. They still haven't really named the replacement for Jose Rivero. The Jose Rivero experiment obviously was a little bit of a disaster. We thought that he would have to be given time because what he did with Orlando Pirates took 2 years to put in place. But you don't have time at a club like Al Ahly. So he was fired. They put the interim manager in place, and they haven't really hit their stride with the interim manager, even though they splashed and they brought in huge signings over the summer for the Club World Cup. Players like Zizou from the rivals Zamalek, players like Trezeguet, obviously. They still haven't, they're not the Al Ahly that we expect them to be at the moment. So we'll see if they start hitting their stride now, because as I said, the season begins really now for a lot of clubs. But I still expect them to I would be shocked if they're eliminated. I wouldn't be shocked if any of the other 3 clubs are eliminated. I think it's Al Ahly, and then if I'm feeling, I think it's going to be one of Asfar as GS Kabylie, but I think it's going to be Asfar. Al Ahly and Asfar out of Group B. Group C, Mamelodi, Sundowns, Al Hilal, MC of Algiers, and Central Lupopo. Wow. Thomas Mlombo, when he was doing draw, he said there was a gasp in the studio over there in South Africa, because Sundowns got drawn with the MC of Algiers group, which is, for South Africans, this is going to be a huge story because you have Gulani Mokwena, Sundowns sort of prodigal son from 2016 to 2023, 7 years. I think he's of any, with Pizzo, actually, with Pizzo, he's the one that made the Sundowns brand what it is. I mean, in recent history, right? Sorry, I don't want to disrespect the teams of the 2000s or the 90s or anything like that. And now he's an MC of Algiers after a little bit of a difficult season last year at Wydad Casablanca with so much instability. And he's doing a great job here at MC of Algiers. Haven't really done an update video. Maybe we should do that if you guys think it's worth doing by popular demand. I'm also going to reach out to Rolani, see if he wants to do an interview before I leave for the AFCON. Maybe on one of these Champions League nights. That would be very, very good for the channel. But he's been, first of all, like, initially, beginning of the season, his squad was handicapped because he loses his best midfielder, Akram Buras, who was signed in Bulgaria. And then 3 or 4 of his key players were playing in the African Nations Championship for Algeria. So he immediately calls on a lot of young players. And since the beginning of the season, he's been playing players like Osama bin Hawa, Muslim Anatouf. There's a guy who just got injured. I'm forgetting his name. Boucherit, Mehdi Boucherit as well. These are very young players. Even last match he played a center half, I think that's 18 years old, Daniel something, his name, I think Daniel Muslim or something. So basically he's putting a lot of trust in youth, which is, great. So you'd like any coach to do that. But he hasn't really let it affect the results. And he starts the season with the Derby of Algiers against USM of Algiers in Blida, not even in Algiers. And that's the other thing that he had to sort of juggle with in the first month, was that Algeria, because MC of Algiers, there was so much crowd trouble last year towards the end of the season. The first few matches of this season, they weren't allowed to have fans in the stadium. So he didn't really have that home field advantage, which is so precious in Algeria. So he's learning about a new league. He doesn't have his best players. He doesn't have his fans. Again, don't underestimate that. It's very, very important. And he's led them to an undefeated start where they're clearly comfortably at the top of the Algerian league with 3 games in hand, I believe. So he's done an incredible job. On top of all of that, he hasn't really received, I think, in my opinion, this is my reading of the situation, the backing that he wanted, I think, in the transfer window. Because while he's probably on a healthy salary and this club does have money, I think he probably wanted 1 or 2 more signings, maybe 1 more in midfield, 1 more on the wing. To be seen if they, actually go and do that in the winter time. But he's been such a joy to have in Algeria, and I think everybody's been impressed by him. His training methods, they're a little bit, unique, and sometimes people laugh at them. But it's just so good to see somebody doing something fresh, somebody doing something different. It's like, for example, last time he had them with swimming glasses, swimming goggles, all the players, and everybody thought that was hilarious. But anyway, so that was a little brief spiel on MC of Algiers. MC of Algiers are carrying the momentum that they've had over the last 2-3 years. They're, of course, 2-time Algerian champions. Last year, they make it to the quarterfinals. They push Orlando Pirates, but ultimately, Orlando Pirates, I think, were the slightly better side. This year, they have a little bit more quality, even though they lost their best midfielder. Still waiting on some of the new signings like Zinedine Farhat to click. But if they do click, and if you get some reinforcements from players returning from injury, like Salio Bangura, the top 21 or 20-year-old Guinean striker, and if maybe he can get 1 or 2 more signings in the winter, I think MC of Algiers will be a contender in this CAF Champions League. So we started with them just because of the Roulani factor. Mamelodi Sundowns. I watched the match against Orlando Pirates. I thought Pirates were the better side, even though the match was played in Pretoria. Sundowns, of course, they lose their best player, their best attacking player and their best player, Lucas Ribeiro, the Brazilian. And a sort of, I think, historic case that I still haven't properly read up on. But from what I understand, Sundowns didn't want to sell him, and then he went to court saying that they're being extortionate or something like that, that they're not being fair. And that basically he managed to redo his contract, which I think is bonkers. He got to resiliate his contract and sign somewhere else. But I need to read more about that to fully understand the situation. But they lose their best player. They do have some new signings, like Fouaz Bessedine as a left back, even though Modiba's held on to his place. Lucas Suarez leaves. They've been playing Cupido as a center half since the Club World Cup. Other than that, there's not much change. Still Shalulile, who's had a good start to the season. You still have Rainers. You still have Arthur Salas, who I think is growing a little bit. Tashrit Matthews had decent starts to the season as well. It's practically the same team. Which again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. They say if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. My problem is not necessarily the squad with Mamelodi Sundowns. I'm starting to lose a little bit of faith in Miguel Cardoso. And this might be a little bit harsh because he came in last year in very difficult circumstances, middle of the season, and he got them to the final, which was, something that they hadn't been to in a place they haven't been to in a while. Um, I just don't know if his pragmatic football. I don't know if I think they do the middle 70% of the pitch well. I don't know if they're good enough in the attacking third or if they're good enough in the defending third. And they have the quality to be good enough in both of those situations. With, player like they just signed the Portuguese player from Vitória Guimarães, I forget his name. I think it's like Nuno Santos. Obviously, good passer of the ball. So you can unlock some situations in that way. But I don't know if they're good in the final third and defending in the back third. Because if you look at, I think they're missing a player like Mbokazi. I think if they could just have a player like that and then you pair him up with one of Kakana or I'm not sure who the left center half is going to be. Like, yes, Cupido is done okay. But when I look at him, he doesn't seem like a big imposing center half. You're going to tell me Mamelodi Sundowns doesn't want that anyways. But in the CAF Champions League, imagine him going up against Fiston Mayele, you know? And you say, oh, but we can play Mosila Busa, we can play, I don't know, Koza, we can play. But I just don't think that's the same. I think they need a player that's like one of the best defenders in Africa, that's aggressive, that's good in the air as a center half. And somebody like Mbukazi would have been, the ideal situation. Maybe they back up the Brinks truck and throw all the money at him. But I think that's what they're missing. So still, obviously, one of the strongest teams in the competition. Still expect them to go far. But even in the league this year, people are feeling like this could finally be Orlando Pirates' year. Speaking of Orlando Pirates, eliminated in the qualifying round to Santa Lua Lupopo, who we also spoke of. Lupopo, I don't think it's a fluke that they're here. If you tell me, like, if we're going to redo that fixture or that tie, I think Pirates are probably going to beat them 7 times out of 10, but it's not 9 times out of 10. It's not a complete fluke. It's not, or maybe 6 or 7 times out of 10, but it's not 9 or, 9.5 times out of 10. I think Lupopo are going to be a good side. I think that people are underestimated. Very combative, particularly when they play at home. Going to Lubumbashi is not easy. And the fact that even again, this is not like, sometimes you have clubs that, like Stade d'Abidjan, they'll win a title 1 or 2 years and then sort of disappear. Lupopo has sort of been in the mix for a while now. And even if you look at how they're doing this year, I think they're top of the table as well. I have confidence in them. The way they played against Orlando Pirates, the way they showed some mental strength in the second leg, despite it, not being an easy place to play in Orlando Stadium, with the altitude and everything, and of course the home fans. But Orlando Pirates really they made it to the penalty kicks at the very end of the game. The Popo, I thought, were defending okay. Even though Pirates, they had a lot of occasions as well, I should say. Still, I think they're going to make things difficult. El Hilal, they're still in the same situation as last year where they're not playing in Sudan. That's going to affect things. Because doing it for 1 year, you could say, you know what, this is kind of cool. This is an adventure. Doing it for a second year, and I think I read a headline. I think they're actually playing in Rwanda this year, not in Mauritania. So you have to move it's one thing to move out of the country and have a base somewhere else. And then if every single year you move, I think that's going to take a toll on the players, honestly. Adama Koulibaly, I think, was good in the qualifying rounds. They still have Giri Mugisha and him. They still have Mohamed Abdulrahman, but they signed a Nigerian striker, I want to say his name is Sunday Adetunji or Sunday Adetunji, I think. Very, very good player as well. He's been crucial in the qualifying rounds. They needed, in my opinion, a striker. I think Mohamed Abdulrahman didn't always live up to the expectations. And other than that, they lost M.A. Tendang, who I think signed for USM of Algiers. But they still have that grit in midfield. And they signed a few Sudanese internationals in defense that I think are going to help them there as well. And they did a goalkeeper swap with Azam. So they sent Fofana, their Ivorian young goalkeeper, to Azam, and Azam sent over Mohamed Mustafa, who's Sudanese national team goalkeeper, the very, very good Sudanese national team goalkeeper. So Al Hilal, I just think being away from home is gonna, for the second straight year, even though they're gonna make teams travel far if they're in Rwanda, they're gonna make teams travel very far because they're in the middle of the country. Besides Lupopo, that would be actually a derby if they have to go to Rwanda. I think MC of Algiers and Mamelodi Sundowns get out of this group. Finally, Esperance versus Esperance are in Group D alongside Simba, Atletico Petroleras, and Stade Malien. I think this is probably the weakest group of all four, and I think Esperance are clear favorites. The problem with Esperance last year was they had an injury to their center half and their captain Yassine Mariah that was never replaced. Until this day, I don't understand why that was the case. They were active in the winter transfer window. They just decided not to replace him. They decided to go with Hamza Jalasi, who I don't think is a horrible player, but he's not at the level of a Yassine Mariah. But besides that, Esperance are still, it's practically the same thing. They don't have Elias Mokwena anymore. Do they have Elias Mokwena? I know he hasn't been playing. I don't think. Excuse me for a second. Where's Elias Mokwena? Yeah, he moved to Saudi Arabia. I'm pretty sure. I was pretty sure they don't have it anymore. So I love that foil counterfoil with Belaili on the ball and Mokwena making runs into space. I think things fell apart towards the second half of last season for Mokwena, but they did bring in a young Algerian winger named Kousseila Boualia, who is a shorter attacking midfielder, came from GS Kabylie, very, very good with his left foot. That's been having a fantastic start to the season. So they haven't really lost quality, in my opinion. It's a different kind of player, but they haven't lost quality in the attacking midfield. Plus, you have a lot of young players that have grown, like Hussein Maasha. Somebody like that is going to grow and continue to get better and can help fill up those spaces. Other than that, Abdurrahman Konate and Onicho Agbelu, both under the age of 22 years old. They have another year under their belt with the experience of last year in the CAF Champions League. So last year, the problem, as I mentioned, injuries that they never fully replaced, and then coaching instability. They started the season with Miguel Cardozo, who ends up in the CAF Champions League final. They get rid of him. They put in Laurencio Regekamp, who seems to be doing well, and then for practically no reason, they take him out and they bring in Maher Mezahi. Maher Mezahi is still in place, so they have a little bit of coaching stability now. They're first in the Tunisian league. Practically the same team. The one main difference, in my opinion, is the young players are a little more experienced and the striker, Florian Daniel. They brought in a French striker named Florian Daniel that adds something different. I think he's an improvement on Rodrigo Rodriguez, because last year they were Rodriguez and Jabri were the two strikers. Rodriguez was the taller striker, more of the target man, and Ashraf Jabri was the I compare him to Aguero a little bit. It's probably not like Aguero, but younger center forward that can he's probably better in link up play, things like that. But Florian Daniel has replaced Rodriguez as that tall target man, and I think he's a better player. He weighs more on defenses. He's better in the air, and I think he's going to be a star for Esperance this season. So I'm pretty high on Esperance. As for the other three teams, I could see Simba getting through, but I think Simba of these B teams, of these pot B teams, are the weakest sides. After El Hilal, Yanga, and Pyramids, yeah, definitely the weakest pot B side. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on them, but I still expect them to get out because I don't have any faith in Atletico Petroleras or Stade Malien. But I think this Group D is the weakest side for sure. Weakest group of all of them for sure. So that's the CAF Champions League draw. Let me know if you watched. Let me know which groups you're most excited to watch. What kind of content you guys are looking forward to in the CAF Champions League. I'm going to stop this video and then do a CAF Confederation Cup either tonight or tomorrow morning. Let you guys go for now, and I'll speak soon. Peace.